The Outsider podcast shares the opinions and analyses of Drew Landry. They are his thoughts, and his thoughts alone, and do not necessarily reflect every member of his audience or newsletter readers. Now, on with the show.
Hello and welcome to another episode of the Outsider Podcast. I'm your host as always, Drew Landry, and folks, thank you for making this the best politics podcast west of I-35 in the Lone Star State. So however, whenever, and wherever you are listening, please know I'm incredibly grateful for your attention. As you've noticed here, there's no video this go around. Do note that next week I will have video as I'm having a video conversation with a House candidate, a Texas House of Representatives candidate. That's next week. But for this week, I just felt like just hitting record and just talking, so I'm not going to have any video for you this time around. So you may miss my smiling face, but don't fret. All right, it'll be back next week. In today's episode, there's really just one story. All right, I'm not going to do a trot around the bases as I normally do, but this go around, there's really one story, and it takes up all of the energy in the room. And folks, that's the GOP, the Republican primary runoff results in Texas. Mainly two races here, okay? The U.S. Senate and Railroad Commissioner. And quite frankly, at the end of the day, the Republicans put forward the most problematic ticket in its state history. So let's break this down here. Texas is one of these southern states that has what's called the majority rule in its primary. Now, I'm not going to assume that you know everything that I'm talking about here, but the primary is an election held within the party. That's you win that, you become the nominee for the general election that's held in November. Texas has a law. It's been around for a very long time. It's called the majority rule. And if a candidate does not receive half plus one of the votes in that primary, then there's going to be a need for what's called a runoff. Okay, so that happened back in March. Now, Texas has its primary on the first Tuesday in March. It's changed over the years. Okay, there was a time when we had our primary in the first Saturday in May. Okay, that's been changed. We now have it on the first Tuesday in March, and that happened. And when that happened for U.S. Senate, John Cornyn finished first, Kim Paxton finished second, Wesley Hunt finished third, and on and on and on and on and on. Cornyn finished first with 42% of the vote. Paxton finished second with 41 point something or whatever percent of the vote, and then Wesley Hunt came in with like 21% of the vote, and then the rest of them finished in single digits. Because nobody in that March primary got a majority, the top two vote recipients, meaning Cornyn and Paxton, now have to face each other, have to challenge each other for the Republican nomination in the runoff that's held on the fourth Tuesday in May. All right, you got all these dates now? Okay. If you were in my Texas government class, that'd be something that you would be required to know. But just understand that if you don't get the majority in March, you got to come back and do it again in May. So that's what happened. That's why we have this runoff election between John Cornyn, sitting U.S. Senator, and being challenged by Texas Attorney General Kim Paxton. And Paxton, listener, oh man, he won 252 counties out of Texas's 254. And that means, by my third grade math skill set, John Cornyn won 2 counties. That's it. And the question that people like to ask is, well, why did that happen? Well, look, there isn't just one answer. there are a multitude of answers. There's a combination of really three specific things. One is the fact that Cornyn supporters didn't show up. That's one very basic thing you can point to. That the people who supported Cornyn back in March either stayed home in this May runoff, or they supported Ken Paxton. The other reason, or another reason, and the second big reason here is that the support that came from Congressman Wesley Hunt mostly went to Ken Paxton. I mean, he endorsed Paxton, and so he's like, go vote for him, and so they did. A lot of them did. So the one that really put him over the edge, though, was the endorsement from the guy who loves attention, our 45th and 47th president, Donald Trump. He endorsed Ken Paxton during the early voting period, and those three reasons is why Paxton won. And that's really, you could also say, why he won by 30 points. That's right, 30 points. I mean, Paxton beat Cornyn 65-35. That's a very decisive victory. I want you to know, though, Cornyn really could have won this thing, but he had the wrong strategy. All right, Republicans, let's just be clear here. We're at a point in our politics where Republicans really don't care about character. And you can tell me, well, they do. You just don't like the character, and it's that I'm being biased in some way. No, I'm being more partisan than anything else. And I say that because the authority on scandals is Brandon Rottinghouse down at the University of Houston. And he has said many times with political science research behind him to say that voters don't really care that much about scandals anymore. And I think this is a great point to that. This is a great example of that. And me being, since this is my podcast and I like to be a bit more partisan than I usually am on TV or even in my writings, I'm just going to blame it on a party. And I'm seeing here that the Republicans are the ones who care less about character than any other party. I mean, let's remember now, 10 years ago in 2016, it was Democrats who did the whole when they go low, we go high thing. And that didn't work. All right. And if you want to tell me that, Republicans care about character, well, of course they do. Then look, former Vice President Mike Pence would have been their nominee in 2024, not Donald Trump. And if they really cared about character, Trump would never be considered. Period. You wouldn't have tried to renominate him in 2024. After 2020, you would have been okay. You've been like, okay, that's it. We're done. See you later, dude. You're out of here. So no, I don't want to hear this whole character conversation. But Cornyn wanted to have that conversation. He tried to paint Paxton as if he was a corrupt person, as if he didn't have the moral integrity to serve. That character was a problem for old Ken. But let's not forget, he's not the first one to try that. The Democrats tried that in 2018. Tried it in 2022. Same result. Didn't work. Paxton still won. So, you look back to the saying that's accredited to Einstein that, if you do the same thing and you expect a different result, that's the definition of insanity. And so it seems like trying this whole character conversation is just flat out a bad idea because it just simply doesn't work. Republicans are not concerned about character anymore. So that game plan to make Paxton seem as if he's an immoral leader didn't fly. What Cornyn should have done is that he should have discussed his record over the years and talk about himself more than he could have ever talked about Paxton. If he just said, the president has 3 Supreme Court justices and I was integral in getting them confirmed, or, I supported his border security bills and I supported the wall and I supported and I supported and I supported. You get this now? If he did that to the point of ad nauseum, his chances of reelection would have increased exponentially. But, there's this old adage out there that if ands and buts were candy and nuts, it'd be Christmas all year round. We can talk about the what ifs. We could have talked about what could have happened and should have happened. And I am one to say, look, I don't know if I was the only one saying this, but I was part of a group to say, hey, look, man, you need to stop doing this whole character thing because it doesn't work in Republican politics anymore. You talk about all the things you've done, and that's what matters most. But he didn't, and he sees the results of it, and that's on him. But let's also know that there's another statewide candidate that the Republicans nominated that's also going to be problematic for them in this state, and that's for a position known as Railroad Commissioner. Now, look, the Railroad Commission is not about regulating the choo-choos, okay? That's not what it is. This is a position that regulates oil and natural gas in Texas. That's what it is. It has nothing to do with railroads. I know that sounds so incredibly stupid. I'm not going to lie. When I found that out when I got here and I had to teach Texas government and I had to learn all this stuff, it was a really bit of a head scratcher because I'm not a native Texan. I'm a transplant. And just looking at the title of that, thinking that would be a key context clue, boy, was I wrong. So the Railroad Commissioner is all about regulating oil and natural gas. Now, there's 3 of them. All right, the state of Texas has 3 railroad commissioners, and they each individually serve 6 terms, and they're all staggered. So every 2 years, one is up for re-election. And this was the term that was up for Jim Wright. Jim Wright has been on the Railroad Commission for a number of years. He was the chairman of the Railroad Commission. And he got challenged by a county party chair by the name of Beau French. And Beau French, I'm not speaking out of turn here. I could be nice and say he posts and discusses and says things that are controversial. That would be kind. It'd also be very soft. But let's also be honest about it. The things he posts and the things he actually believes are racist, xenophobic, and anti-Semitic. And it's known. You just go to his social media pages and you spend 25 minutes or so. Heck, you can even spend maybe 5 minutes just scrolling through, and you can find within a matter of moments some anti-Semitic post, some xenophobic or something racist on his social media. And he's proud of it. He's like, yeah, of course I don't want them brown folks here. Get them out of here. Oh, well, I'm Beau French. Oh, yeah. I mean, it's ridiculous. And this is a key difference between the Republicans and the Democrats. You remember from last week, I told you about Maureen Galindo, who posted without question anti-Semitic things on her Instagram page. And she was in the runoff for Congress, and she lost. Democrats had the opportunity to embrace an anti-Semite. They rejected it. Republicans had the ability to reject a racist, a xenophobe, and an anti-Semite, and they embraced him. They said, welcome. We want you here. When the rightful response is GTFO. But he and Kim Paxton are going to make a lot of these statewide races, a lot of these down ballot races, incredibly competitive. That's how bad they are. And look, people are going to pay more attention to the top of the ticket. That's going to take all of the attention. It's going to take a lot of the air out of the room. People who are going down ballot, they really have to pay attention to these people. And so it's going to be up to the top of the ticket to try to smooth things over. But Beau French is bad. Beau French is, he probably wants to change his name to Beau American. That's what if he was truly listening to himself, he'd say, I don't want to be Beau French. I want to be Beau American. So, whatever. But he's another albatross. Look, even Dan Patrick, the lieutenant governor in Texas, didn't endorse this guy. Governor Abbott didn't endorse this guy. House Speaker Dustin Burrows from Lubbock did not endorse this guy. They were all holding up their fingers in the crucifix, saying, "Stay away. Don't want you." But now they have to deal with him. So, with these two problematic candidates, and again, that's being kind. It's being very kind. The story now shifts from Paxton's Republican nomination victory to now his general election matchup with State Representative James Tallarico. And let's be honest with you here, folks, the Republicans have been busy. The GOP is very, very busy attacking Tallarico, the 37-year-old candidate. They're trying the whole naming thing. They're trying the whole nickname, whatever sticks on the wall. It's the thing that Trump likes to do. Like, he called Jeb Bush low energy Jeb, or, little Marco, that sort of thing. So, now they're trying it here with a Tallarico, and they're calling him something like Talafrico. Now they're trying low T, like, testosterone. Low T Tallarico. Or they say that he's a vegan. It's funny because it's just funny. It's also not true. He's not a vegan. But they also like to hinge on something that he said 5 years ago, and that the fact that God is non-binary. I'm going to go on a side note here. Charlie Kirk said the same thing when he was on the show called Surrounded, hosted by Jubilee. It was Charlie Kirk and 25 or 20 woke liberals. And the conversation surrounded what was a woman. And he got a definition. And then that person turned it on him and said, okay, what's a man? And Kirk didn't really define what a man was. He just kept saying, well, I know what a man is, and you're looking at him. And then the conversation turned to God. Well, is God a man? And then Kirk had to actually admit here, he had to actually say that God is genderless, that the Greek word Adonai means that it's genderless. So the fact that God is an all-powerful figure, ever-present, right, all-knowing, omnipotent, omniscient, ever-present, and that therefore gender is not really something that he can really be. Something that God cannot be is having a gender. Okay? It's ingrained to me that to use the pronouns of he, him. But I guess if you wanted to really utilize the fact that God's a woman, does that change anything about the story? Does that really change anything about salvation? If you believe God to be an omniscient, an omnipotent, an ever-present figure, why does that pigeonhole God to one gender? You know what I mean? So that's the point that Charlie Kirk was making. And that's essentially the point that Tallarico was making. Now he's admitted that he was trying to be, provocative whenever he has said that. But I want to be clear here, and I'll actually post that whole conversation in this original post. You can go find it, and you can watch the entire conversation if you want. It'll be there. But because Charlie Kirk said that God is genderless, that's okay. But James Tallarico said that God is non-binary, and somehow that's radical. Make it make sense, folks. Make it make sense. But let me also time back in here, because they also like to think, they being the Republicans, are attacking Tallarico, and they also are trying to do this whole weird and creepy thing because he follows women on Instagram. Again, we have to raise our eyebrows and go, there are women who follow women on Instagram. I don't know who to break that to. All right? I'm still scratching my head as to why this is a thing. You know, they say, well, they're OnlyFans models. They're OnlyFans models. Oh my gosh. And they're on Instagram. Oh my gosh. Look, let's just face a fact. Ken Paxton probably is going to James Tallarico's Instagram page, going to his followers list, finding the OnlyFans models that he's following, that Tallarico is following. And Paxton's going to follow them, and he's going to send them dirty pics. I bet you. I bet you a dozen donuts that he's done that. You know the very moment Paxton sees a woman, his pants fall down. Okay? I mean, name for me another candidate who has to wear like 4 or 5 belts just to go campaign. And you know, if you're pro Paxton, I mean, you don't want this man to go block walking because you never know if he's going to run into a woman. And the second that woman answers the door, he's campaigning for something else. So I just always laugh whenever this is brought up. Well, he follows women, Drew. He follows women. And is he having an affair with them? You know, I've addressed this in prior episodes. I really don't need to go back on all this. But I just want to reiterate here that James Tallarico is not buying a house with his mistress in a gated area. Ken Paxton is. James Tallarico is not a homewrecker. Ken Paxton is. Okay? Let's just call a spade a spade. Just say what it is. If you seriously cannot have a character debate with Kim Paxton involved in it. And that's why Republicans don't want to have it. So they come up with these crazy things that he's somehow low T, or he's Talafrico, or he's vegan, which, you know, I mean, some of these things are pretty ridiculous. You know, they're just hoping that they all stick. But the thing that really sticks the most is the whole non-binary thing, which is weird. You know? Again, I've already explained why if Charlie Kirk can say it, why can't anybody else? But whatever. But also, I think you need to realize a trick that I just pulled is that you need to see that I just turned an attack on Tallarico to Paxton. And this is what happens when the GOP, or really any party nominee, is morally bankrupt and is the standard bearer for that party. And it's easier to turn the tables on him and on them when that's the actual case. It's also funny that I even saw a video of Congresswoman from Colorado, Lauren Boebert, who's talking about morality now, which that's a laugh. You know, she said how Tallarico is leading a cult, which is really special coming from MAGA acolyte Lauren Boebert from the MAGA cult. And she's got her own issues with character and morality. You can Google all that. I'm not getting into that. But let's be clear, if you're watching the Republicans and what they're arguing, also know what they're not saying. Because they know that they can't do this. they cannot tell anyone to enthusiastically vote for Kim Paxton. They can't. They're telling people to vote against Tallarico. There's a meaning in those words. That isn't by accident, folks. They're appealing to party identification, not the issues. Okay? It's almost June here, and the Republicans are so scared of Tallarico because they think that he can win, for one, and two, they nominated the wrong guy. I mean, there's a long-standing rumor that George R.R. Martin, who's the author of the whole, Game of Thrones and the Song of Ice and Fire and all that, there's a long-standing conversation that he spoke to his friend who's the author of the Outlander series and asked her if she ever killed off a character too soon. And she said no. And so there's a lot of rumor and innuendo that Martin is having a bit of remorse for having killed off Ned Stark for too early, that he's now running into problems. Killed the wrong guy. Makes, season 1 and that first book was great. I mean, you didn't see it coming. That's the beauty of the story. But he realized he may have done something wrong. The Republicans have done something wrong in Texas. They've nominated the wrong guy. The National Republican Senatorial Committee, which is the campaign arm of Senate Republicans, are very upset. I think the word you want to use here is they're pissed because Paxton is the nominee. That's why. You may say, well, isn't he more conservative and all? That has nothing to do with it. The issue that everyone is taking issue with, the issue that everyone has, is that they now have to spend money. They're going to have to spend $25 to $30 million to defend Texas. When if Cornyn was the nominee, they wouldn't have to do that. So they're going to have to spend a lot of money here when they could have used that money to defend Iowa, Ohio, Alaska, go on the attack in Michigan, North Carolina, and even New Hampshire. Maybe even if they wanted to try to defend Maine. And all of those resources could help 6, maybe 7 candidates. Okay, 6, 7. All of that is now focused on one seat. All that money is focused on one seat. It is expensive, folks, to run a statewide campaign in Texas. When you have 3 of the top 10, I guess 4 of the top 10 most populated cities in America, meaning you've got 4 big media markets, it takes a lot of money to really do that. And so you need an exponential, a gargantuan, amount of money to campaign here. And now Republicans have to use what they would use in other states to defend several states to now defend one. And that's the main reason, and everybody misses that, by the way. Everyone kind of just glosses over that. That Republicans are upset that Cornyn lost. John Thune, the Senate Republican Majority Leader, he wasn't exactly thrilled at the fact that Paxton won. Tom Tillis out of North Carolina, who's leaving the Senate, by the way, he's not very thrilled that Kim Paxton won. Susan Collins isn't either. I mean, this is reminding you of something here. This should remind a lot of Republicans of 2010 and 2012. You're seeing the results of seeds being sown by the Tea Party. While this is all great for the MAGA movement, that you've got these solid conservative people, the general electorate will turn on you. Joe Donnelly beat Richard Murdoch in 2012. The Democrat beat the Republican in 2012 up in Indiana. That happened, folks. We're not talking that it was some sort of a blowout victory. It's because Richard Murdoch, his true self, showed up. Todd Akin lost in 2012 because of something that he said in Missouri. We got to understand that. And it's only going to be a matter of time until Kim Paxton says something that is incredibly damning, or does something that's incredibly damning, that even Republicans themselves will stay home and say, nope, we're not going to get involved in that. And so that's the money that they're going to have to use to try to get people excited about voting against Tallarico. So they're going to make Tallarico sound like some hippie, that he's somehow akin to Vermont Senior Senator Bernie Sanders, or that he's, sleeping with a Castro brother, or he's, or that he reads the Communist Manifesto every night before he goes to bed, or something stupid. You know what I mean? And they're going to try and do that, and they're going to try all these little nicknames to see what sticks. Honestly, the Tallarico campaign has embraced the Talafrico label. I mean, they're selling shirts on it now, saying that I'm a Talafrico. So it may not really work that much. Of course, look, a lot of these things are just going to fly right back in the face in Paxton, because you can say, well, yeah, you have the ability to say somebody who has low T, seeing how you've used all your T on other women, or it looks like you're using something to keep up your low T, because that hair on your head is not working out too well. Clearly, you're using it for something else. I mean, look, the attacks just write themselves. But Paxton makes this race close. You're not really going to be enthused to vote against somebody. And so that's the ongoing fear here, is that there are candidates on the Republican side who are already getting mad at the Cornyn people because they've threatened that they won't show up in November. It's a fine thing to say that in May. Fine thing to say that at the beginning of June. Let's circle back and have that conversation about early October, late September. And believe it or not, that's going to have a lot to say. It's going to have a lot to do with the president's approval ratings. People don't, for some reason, there's people who don't believe that's a real thing, that they don't matter. Of course it matters. And the polling that will come out, Tallarico's got to, if he's really wanting to really hammer this home, he's got to have over 50% in non-Democratic polling firms. Okay, I mean, we're talking University of Houston, University of Texas, Emerson polling. I mean, like the really good ones, he's going to have to be above 50% on that. And he's got work to do on that. It's not like he's got it in the bag. I mean, he's got to spend the next few times really earning up his, to drive down the undecideds and put them in his column. And, that's why you have time for that. But the problem that the Republicans have is trying to get people excited to vote against somebody. Can they actually get people excited to vote for Kim Paxton? I don't know. But I know this. We're going to find out. And that's something everybody hates. Folks, that's all from me today. Thank you so much for listening to the Outsider Podcast. Again, no video today, as you have seen, or you have noticed, I guess. Next week, I will have that. I'm having a great conversation with a Texas House candidate. I'm not going to name the candidate here, but you will see that candidate next week. Looking forward to that conversation. Hopefully, you'll be excited to check that out, too. Just to let you know, if you or someone you know would like to be a guest on the Outsider Podcast, folks, shoot me an email. drew.landry9@gmail.com. That's the email that you need to send to me. And I'll talk to anybody. I don't care. I mean, if you have a talking dog, if you have a talking monkey, if you have, I don't know, a goat that somehow can speak English, let's get Lassie, let's get Oscar, let's get them all on here. All right, let's get them on, and we'll have a great conversation. But for real, look, I have an open microphone policy. You want to come on here and talk, we can make that happen. I have no problem with it. But again, folks, that email to contact me is drew.landry9@gmail.com. Again, that's drew.landry9@gmail.com. Thank you again for listening to the Outsider Podcast. And folks, I will see you again very, very soon.
The preceding analyses and opinions were that of Drew Landry and his alone. They did not necessarily reflect all of his podcast listeners or newsletter readers. Thank you for listening to the Outsider Podcast. Be sure to follow The Outsider on X and on Facebook. Also, don't forget to sign up to be a free subscriber to his newsletter on Substack. Just look for The Outsider. We will see you again next time.